Deputy Connolly and Deputy Daly. Okay. Well, we had very passionate speeches at the Paris conference, and we do know, I think we can all agree, that climate change is extremely dangerous for our generation and also for future generations, which are facing a grim reality. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change tells us that if we continue as we are, 50 million more people will be at the risk of hunger by 2050, and the World Bank tells us in 15 years' time, if we keep going as we are, 100 million more people will join those who are already in extreme poverty. Paris was about multilateral action on climate change, and we're now approaching the first anniversary of Paris, so we ask what can be achieved. And one example brought to my attention is in Ethiopia, that today there are 10 million people dependent on food aid due to persistent drought that has been worsened by the impacts of El Nino. We know the figure of CO2 emissions in metric tonnes per capita: Uganda 0.1, Ireland 10.5, and those countries which contribute least to greenhouse gases are those that are most impacted by climate change. And they're the countries that are already suffering conflict and hunger and desperate poverty. And you know yourself, Minister, from your involvement with the WEPA, you've seen it firsthand. The main causes of global warming, we know, are burning fossil fuels and emissions. The fossil fuels account for 2/3 of the emissions causing climate change, but yet in 2015 around 70% of new energy investment was in fossil fuels, and we're told that 80% of existing fossil fuel reserves must remain unburned if the Paris goals are to be met. So it's vital that we do more to phase out the fossil fuels, and some countries are having success. They're using more wind and solar power than fossil fuels. Now, the fossil fuel divestment movement, analysts are seeing that it's risky to invest in fossil fuels. So looking at the Irish Strategic Investment Fund, will the government divest public money away from fossil fuels industries and instead adopt 100% renewable energy investment policy for the fund? Now, Minister Noonan was asked in a parliamentary question, and he said, quote, "The issue of fossil fuel divestment may be considered as part of the process of the autumn review of the Irish Strategic Investment Fund strategy." Now, he used the word may, but I hope that that becomes will, and that would be an affirmation of the Paris Agreement. Also, prevention of further climate change is better than reaction to climate change, and there are various reports telling us that it's up to 20 times cheaper to prevent further climate change as opposed to dealing with the effects and the costs of not being active. And I do want to acknowledge the work of Trócaire and our other NGOs who are out in the Global South and under other countries, and they're seeing exactly first-hand the effects of the policies from the developed world. Drought, food insecurity, malnutrition, starvation, ill health, early death, infant mortality, not to mention also the effect on the animals that these farmers and people need. So much is caused by what we are doing in our world. And these climatic events are also exposing the vulnerability of plans that are there to fight poverty, and I think that they're also putting the Sustainable Development Goals under threat. It's not just an environmental issue, it's also an ethical and a moral one.